Perhaps at first glance it might seem that Thanos in the movie Avengers Infinity War follows the motivations of a generic and common villain in a superhero movie. That is, to destroy humanity, the galaxy, you understand me. However, if we pay a little more attention, we can realize that there is a real motivation and even understandable behind their actions. And this motivation has to do with a theory called Malthusianism, which talks about the control of overpopulation. Welcome geekers to a new video essay. If it's your first time on the channel, let me tell you that we like to analyze superheroes in depth and take comics very seriously, and since the stories are much deeper than they sometimes seem. If you also think so, you've come to the right place. Today I present to you this video essay which I title The True Motivation of Thanos in Infinity War. Superhero cinema has its memorable villains, its passable villains, and then there's Steppenwolf, who is a clear example of everything that should not be done with an antagonist. That is, he is part of those villains who seem to be evil simply because they are evil and who want to destroy the world just because. Surely the writers of these stories could give us a very detailed and super wow explanation of these characters' motivations, but the reality is that the most important thing is that these motivations are noticeable in the movie. In the case of Thanos, who plans to use the Infinity Stones for his destructive purposes, the case is very different. By the way, I take this opportunity to tell you that from this moment we will be revealing spoilers from the movie Avengers Infinity War. Chapter 1. Thanos' motivation. When Bruce Banner describes Thanos in the movie, he says he's like a plague that invades planets, takes what he wants, and wipes out half the population. In this scene, perhaps Tony Stark thought that wiping out half the population was an exaggeration, an approximation, or simply a way of putting it. However, we later realized that Thanos really does want to eliminate exactly half the population, and this is a very important point. If Thanos is so evil or a mad titan, why would he want to eliminate half the population? If he has the power to do so, why doesn't he just wipe us all out? In the comics, the idea is proposed that Thanos has been obsessed with death from a very early age and later falls in love with its physical incarnation. To impress her, Thanos decides to kill half of the universe let's say, as a form of flirtation. In the movie Infinity War, this concept was modified. Thanos wants to eliminate half of the universe's population, but here, Thanos doesn't carry out his actions to seek someone's approval, and it doesn't seem like he does it for personal glory either. In the movie, Thanos is an individual completely committed to his cause, his ideals and his own convictions, so much so that he is willing to suffer to achieve them. We saw this when he sacrifices his own adopted daughter, the only person in the universe whom he loves, in order to take possession of all the Infinity Stones. Obviously, if he's willing to kill his daughter, he's also willing to kill anyone else who stands in his way. In the movie, Thanos has been eliminating half of the population of various planets with the intention of making each world's natural resources sufficient for its inhabitants. So we have that Thanos sees himself as a messiah who comes to save people from a miserable or hungry existence and seeks the Infinity Stones to be able to achieve his goal on a large scale. In this way, Thanos has the idea that he will give the universe a necessary balance. For Thanos then, for a population to survive, a part of it has to die. Now it turns out that this type of philosophy about overpopulation and natural resources that Thanos follows exists and has been put into practice in real life. It's a theory called Malthusianism. Chapter 2. What is Malthusianism? In the late 18th century, an Anglican cleric named Thomas Malthus wrote an essay about overpopulation and how nature has certain measures to keep us in a controlled population. You might laugh at the phrase controlled population today, but believe it or not, this was still true in the 18th century. It turns out that in the year 10,000 BC, the world population was below 1 billion people, and more than 11,000 years later, when Malthus was alive, we were still at a very similar figure without exceeding 1 billion inhabitants. According to him, a population, whether of people or animals, grow to the point where food is no longer sufficient for everyone. This is when natural predators, climate, diseases, and above all hunger, cause the weakest individuals, or the poor in the case of humans, to die, giving the strongest, the rich in this case, the opportunity to survive. This is when food becomes sufficient for everyone again, and the cycle starts over. Malthus called this the cycle of misery, and thought it was something completely natural and necessary for the world. Thanos seems to live with this ideology with one crucial difference. For Thanos, it's not the rich or the strong who survive. When Thanos kills half of the universe's population at the end of Infinity War, I know I'm still in shock too. It seems that it's chance that decides who lives and who dies. Additionally, Thanos lived in a time that Malthus did not, and it turns out that due to technological advances in agriculture and medicine, people are now able to survive in our environment much longer, as we are more resistant to diseases and produce more food than before. So, from 1850 onwards, we have grown at a much faster rate, depleting our natural resources. This makes us wonder, how much are Thanos and Malthus right? Chapter 3. The problem of overpopulation. Despite the fact that technological advances have allowed us to generate more food than in other times, currently in various parts of the world, we have a serious problem with famine. In addition, we humans have wiped out other animal species and consume our natural resources as if they were infinite. Taking all this into account, one can understand Thanos' stance and his intention to control the population. However, there are many flaws in a Malthusian discourse. The first and most obvious in this case is that Malthusianism can be used as a justification to commit genocide under the pretext that it is a natural law. Now, Thanos is a fictional villain who committed fictional genocide, but Malthusianism was used to justify the actual death of millions of Irish between 1846 and 1851 who died of starvation after a plague that affected the potato crop in the region. The English of that time noted that the Irish population was increasing and did not allow foreign aid to reach the region, letting millions of people starve to death in order to have a more controllable population. And yes, these English cited Malthusianism as their source. Another flaw of Malthusianism is addressed in the Infinity War movie, when Gamora tells Thanos that her people were happy despite not having abundant resources. And it seems that Thanos has the idea that it's better to die than not live with a certain abundance. If you look at the happiness indices in the world, it turns out that many countries that are considered the happiest often are also those with fewer economic resources. But let's try not to go to extremes. What happens when we seek a middle ground between the genocide that Thanos wants and the rampant overpopulation? It turns out that in China, during the 80s, to combat overpopulation, a law was applied that only allowed each family to have one child. Sounds good, doesn't it? In fact, 76% of the population seemed to agree with this law. However, this law brought about very negative consequences. It turns out that many newborn girls were killed by their families in an attempt to have a male child. It is estimated that there were about 50 million murders for this reason. In addition, many women were forced to abort to avoid facing fines. As you can see, for me, a good superhero story uses fictional themes to talk to us about real problems and our relationship with them. A comic can give us the entry to talk, discuss, and inform us about real and relevant topics. In this case, Thanos' stance allowed us to reflect a bit about the problems of overpopulation in the world. Whenever someone has tried to control the population by force, this in turn brings other negative and sinister consequences. And maybe at first a Malthusian discourse sounds attractive. However, we have to look for alternative ways to combat this problem. As you can see, there's much more to this topic. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel to see more content like this, where I take comics and superheroes very seriously. I am Go, the Geek Monitor, and see you later.